Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're gonna do a little something different. We're gonna try out a new format here, where Sam is going to teach me how to be a dungeon master.
Indeed. Call it DM Academy. We're here to learn. Bob, take copious notes. There will be a test later.
Oh, great! I
It's
think
it's
I
back
have
to grade school for you.
I think I have an unpaid biller out here I could write on the back of. All right.
Perfect. So my thought process behind this, right, is I'm gonna give you in order of like most important need to know information to DM to least important need to know information to DM over the course of this video to generalize. If you had a DM tomorrow, what is it you would need to do all that fun stuff, right?
Okay.
I think
I,
that there's
I play before we go on, just to set the record straight. I been playing this game a long time, and I have DM'd in the past. I've never been good at it. I've never enjoyed it. It's Yeah. I imagine one of your steps is going to be preparation, and that's where I ultimately fail.
I'll give you this. I don't necessarily think prep is needed to be a good DM. But we'll dive into it. I think the first and most important thing, if you're gonna leave this video with anything, Bob and or viewers at home, I think what you should walk away from is this: what the objective of being a DM is, right? I think if you understand what your objective is, what you're at the end of the session, what is it you will have liked to accomplish, what is your role at the table, I think you will have at least the guide stones to create a fun and memorable experience, agnostic of how many rules you get wrong, or how little you know about the character player sheets, or how much like you just roll a monster that just it's utterly just shithouse trashed by the players, just destroyed in 2 rounds, does 0 damage, misses every attack. The most important thing to take away whenever you're going to DM is why you're doing it, and you're doing it so that everyone, and that includes you, leaves the table feeling like, oh my god, that was so much fun, I want to do that again, right? At the end of the day, agnostic of system, even if you're playing Pathfinder, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, if you're playing Blades in the Dark, if you're playing, D&D 5th edition, at the end of the day, your objective as a DM, more than anything else, is that everyone walks away feeling like they had a great time, like they did something cool that they want to do again. Now, the specifics of then how you make that occur, that's a lot more tricky to answer, and it's going to vary table to table, obviously. But if you go in with the mindset not of how do I make balanced encounters, or how do I make good role play sessions, how do I do voices, how do I calculate CRs, how do I give them good loot and stuff, you can throw most of that out and still walk away from Dungeons and Dragons having had a really great time. In fact, some of the most fun D&D I've had in my life was really off-the-cuff roleplay crap that led to a lot of silly ideas cascading into a dumb adventure that didn't really go anywhere or use any of the core rules, but was still a really great time, and everyone coming back next week. Now,
All
at the
right,
same time,
let me stop you right there again. That's another. I think like a fundamental difference between you and me. People watching this channel can probably see that you are able to talk quite a bit about any topic. Just ramble, 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 go. I am not. I come in with little bits and pieces here when I have something to say. But yeah, you ask me, okay, talk about this for 5 minutes. I will stand here looking like a dumbass silently at the camera. That's another, because I think I imagine a lot of people on this channel know about my books. If not, they're great. Go buy them. But
great.
yeah, I've had fans say, "Oh man, I'd love to be in a game that you're running," and I got to say every time, no, no, you wouldn't. Writing a novel is a lot different than being a dungeon master, and it's not always like readily obvious why. But yeah, when I write a book, I mean, I will sit there for 10 minutes, like trying to figure out how to word one character's line. Uh, DMing though, it's a lot more. You got to be a lot more spontaneous.
Yeah, I will say, like, diving in past, make sure everyone walks away having fun. I think the most important things to know how to do as a DM are make things up. Like, that's 80+% of what you're doing. No amount of DMing prep is gonna get you to a spot where you're not going to have to make things up. Like,
Yeah.
even if you were to write down every single potential line of dialogue you think your NPCs are going to possibly make, even if you have all of the Skyrim intro NPCs of, "Hail, adventurers, what brings you to this fine town on this evening? And oh, you're seeking this quest hook? Well, I know of a blacksmith." Like, there's gonna ask dumber questions than that almost always. There's always going to be human elements that get thrown in the wrenches that make it impossible for you to have a fleshed out idea of exactly how to engage with everything.
How do you feel about toast?
That's honestly a very real question
Yes.
you could expect to hear from players. That's another really important point too. Beyond, like, this is something you can practice. This isn't something that you necessarily are like, "Oh, I'm really good at bullshit talking and Bob isn't, thus I'm a good DM and he couldn't be," right? It is a practice skill. The more you do it, the better you get. It's not like, well, I've always sort of had the gift of gab as far as a person that likes to hear themselves talk. Being a better DM is something that takes a lot of time, patience, and effort. And there's a lot of gauging, how long should I be talking? What are the most important things that should be coming out of my mouth? And what things matter for me to mention, right? All of that is going to be really big elements as far as how you sculpt your D&D experience for your players and yourself. What you say and what you don't say are both very important elements to keeping games moving, feeling like they have driven goals, feeling like the players can go places and things like that, right? So, like, a big element of fun is having a feeling of an objective and that you can achieve that objective or work towards that objective in a meaningful way. And that all comes down to DMs giving players clear plot hooks, clear routes to explore, clear options, and don't give you this lacking feeling of I'm in an empty void with nothing to do. That's oftentimes I see a big fault that some DMs fall into is, I want my players to have this big open sandbox, and then they describe there's a mountain range, and there's, a boat over there, and there's, these wide sprawling open cities. Go, and the players go, and do what? Like, okay, we go into town and get drinks. Now what? And, like, that's not necessarily always a great place to be. You can go really in depth and talk as much as I do about all kinds of different things, but if you don't give, like, clear objectives, clear directions and next places to go, your players can very quickly feel lost and helpless and pointless. Not even helpless, pointless in their doings. They can get bored very quickly. And I think one of the biggest factors to a DM struggling is when players get bored. And that's something that you should look to alleviate as often as possible. You want as little boredom at the table as you can do, which is why I nominate don't do shopping sessions. Shopping sucks, but that's a whole other.
I don't know. I've had some fun shopping sessions.
God, I hate shopping sessions so much. I had a previous experience where someone else was DMing for us. It was like a bunch of random people whenever I was a pit, like year 2 or whatever. And we met online and there was like 9 of us, right? So it's way too large of a D&D group to begin with. And we had spent like 45 minutes watching 3 different people have one-on-one encounters, talking and bartering over like mundane items from the player's handbook. And I wanted to rip my hair out. I was so fucking bored to the point where, like, after the third person went, I was like, because it was like an hour and a half into the session, I look over to the guy, and I was like, I have an idea. You brought a character sheet too. We weren't sure who was going to DM. Why don't I try for a little bit now? You can come in and play, and we'll, shake things up and see what happens. I literally, like, very kindly was like, hey, this sucks. Sit down. Let me do it. And then it was a lot of fun past that. We stopped shopping and went on a cool ass adventure where there was, towers and wizards and explosives and goblins and things. Which is my preferred way to run D&D, is high fantasy adventure nonsense, not shopping, ideally. Some anecdote,
yeah.
but.
All right.
So, Bob,
yes.
you now have this idea of, all right, I know players need to have fun. What do you start with? I've got nothing. I'm going in on my DM wants a break this week. You have to DM. What's the first thing you do to start prepping your session that you kind of have the understanding and goals of what you're supposed to do? What you're supposed to end with?
How am I going to railroad the players?
And I need this to be clear. Everyone out there, that is not a joke. That is a real question that you have to ask yourselves, because there isn't a game that exists that does not involve some amount of railroading. It's just a thing that you have to get used to. Stomach the idea. It is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It's just how D&D needs to function. Anyone tells you otherwise, that, oh no, but there's no railroading, players can do whatever they want, is a bold-faced liar.
I'll tell you something I did in one of my few sessions that I DM'd. I had the players all in a tavern or whatever, and one of them said, "Okay, I forgot what he wanted to do," and I said, "No, your drinks are all poisoned. You pass out. You wake up on a boat."
See, in my vision of what, like, how I would DM is they just start on the boat, right? Like, there isn't a window for them to go do other things. You wake up from a long night and you're passed out on this boat. What happened? Figure it out. Now you're in a different kind of environment.
Yeah.
Out of the Abyss is one of the most, I wouldn't say the most critically acclaimed of the most recent adventures they've done, but it is a very popular one compared to the 5th edition adventures that are out right now. That adventure starts you're in jail. Right, like you're in the Underdark, you've been captured, now you're escaping the Underdark. That's the whole premise of the book, right? So that's really on rails. Also really good, right? So it isn't railroading, not necessarily a bad thing. Now, how you start railroading people probably doesn't involve your drinks are all poisoned, you fall unconscious, and you get on the boat. There's a little bit cleaner, smoother ways of less, path least resistance.
I needed to establish here's how this game is going to work, because I'm not going to go. This is the effort I'm going to put in.
Understood. To that point, how you establish boundaries in D&D. When I say boundaries, I mean not necessarily like comfort zones, more so what are players able to get away with is a really important thing to establish quickly. So I have found a lot of DMs that I've worked with tend to be kind of pushovers in this department whenever they want people to have fun. And then I'm not going to say that's necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes players like playing GTA 5 and D&D. They like running around, breaking the laws, getting 5-star police. Everyone's on their ass. They're running away, stealing everything that they come across. That can be a fun way to play D&D for some groups. The murder hobo experience to the finest, where you just cultivate the murder hobos. You let them be complete and utter menaces to society that destroy the world and get a bunch of levels. And if that whole group is having fun with it, you're doing it right. Now, most groups don't always have fun with it that way. A couple people can tend to derail things if one or two players are really trying to push the boundaries and see exactly how much they can get away with. And some other players just want to go on a classic fantasy adventure. They want to be good guys here. They want to do X, Y, or Z. So establishing that boundary is very important. I have found the easiest way and the most important way to do that is NPCs that do not use the monster stat blocks from the monster manual. And that's going to be like really, really important because guards in the monster manual suck. Most like CR2 or 3 like guard captains and whatnot can't deal with 2nd level spellcasters. They just get bodied by them. Any amount of magic overcomes a whole lot of non-magic. You need to be prepared as a DM to put your foot down and have specific areas, and if you're in a high fantasy world, specific environments where you are like, magic doesn't work. There's very clear reasons why magic doesn't work, but magic doesn't work. The players know that ahead of time, and they understand that if they screw up, there are consequences. Showing them those consequences is a very good way to sort of introduce the kinds of boundaries you're looking for. Maybe the players come into town. There's they're thinking about doing some thieving and stealings and whatnot. They find a person that is locked inside a magical block on display in front of all of the town, floating into the air for 3 weeks' time because they stole something they weren't supposed to steal. And this is a town where that is like strictly prohibited. You can't do any of that nonsense in here. Magic and fighting gets you put in the magic floating box, right? There are ways to showcase that to help restrain players from necessarily trying to go full crazy murder hobo, do whatever I want, if that's the objective. Making sure the boundaries are clear and established is a really important place to start.
Sure. So, all right, this is more general. What else do you have for me specifically? It's my first day DMing.
Okay.
What do I need to do?
Okay. So generally I'm trying to keep this as like general just DM life advice as I can without diving super deep in any given topic, because like we could do whole videos on how to set CR, how to set specific numbers. But there are some quick and fast guidelines to keep in mind. One, establish your adventure goal out the gate, make it very clear, make it sure that players know that's what they're doing this session, right? Mm-hmm. Is if they come down to sit at the table, that doesn't necessarily have to be one thing. There can be options, but as soon as they're starting playing, they are within 5 to 10 minutes given ample opportunity to go do things. Those things might be investigating something spooky in the sewers. It might be, talking to somebody that's been having complaints about, weird sleepwalking habits. It might be, loose little breadcrumbs that get the adventure started. It also might be they're drugged and wake up on a boat. All of that is where you want to make sure you're starting. You also want to know where your end point is. The end point is, the big battle that you want to prep for. And prepping for an encounter is a whole gigantic can of worms that I don't necessarily want to touch on here because it's really
that's a different video. Yeah.
Yeah, but like you want to get them to that point, right? So having a general structured outline of starting point and ending point is important. The middle stuff, that's all where the improvisation comes down. You want to have loose ideas of this is how I can get them to go to this place. This is how I can get them to, feel driven to do this thing or whatever. But a lot of what you're going to be looking for is ways to integrate that into what the players decide to do. So if we have an example, right, where let's say you want them to go fight a dragon wormling that's being worshipped by kobolds, right? Some kobolds in a nearby cave captured a white dragon wormling, and it's been causing problems for the local townsfolk. You think it'd be a cool encounter, you want to run that, right? You know where you're ending up, fighting a big white wormling. You know where you're starting, which is in a tavern with nothing. So now we have to figure out how we're getting from in the tavern with nothing to there. The easiest way to do that would be someone to have a poster. Wanted, white dragon wormling in this location, go kill it. Easy number one way, nice short adventure, clean and crisp. You could instead add layers in the middle there too, though. You could say something's been terrorizing the fields. There's been mysterious ice crop or icing happening, killing their cattle. We're finding them frozen in the fields, dead. What's going on? Then you kind of have like these middle steps. Now they can go investigate the fields if they want to. They could see a whole bunch of billboards for a bunch of different problems, and all of them, coincidentally, even if the players don't know it out the gate, point back to this magical dragon thing. That's going to help players not feel like they're being railroaded, even when they definitely are. Having multiple plot threads out the gate that point in different directions give players a lot of agency in saying, I don't want to do that, I want to do this. And coincidentally, look at that. It all comes pointing back to the thing that I prepped. And that's one of the places I would recommend DMs start with where you want to end, know where you are currently, and drop little breadcrumbs and tidbits to decide how easy or how much time you want to necessarily invest in getting them from where they're starting to where they're ending. And if you can think that out, if you can prep that in your mind, the starting and end point, that's really the minimum that you need to just DM something. We can sit down right now, and with just the prep that I've talked to you about, I can run that for you. I can make that occur. Now, granted, I'm really good at making encounters on the fly. I'm really good at making NPCs on the fly. I've got a lot of practice in the improv stuff. The better you are at the improv stuff, the faster and less prep you have to do. But that really is the minimum you need to have an adventure, is know where your players are starting, know where you want them to end, and get some ideas of how you can sprinkle in ways to get them from that beginning to that end.
Sure.
Now, more specifics we can dive into as well. We can talk about basic, understanding the skills is very important. Having a diverse amount of skills can help a lot of players feel like they're impacting the game more. That's a very valuable thing to do. So, for example, I like to sprinkle animals in almost all of my adventures because animals work with the animal handling and nature skills really well. So druids and rangers and other archetypes can interface with those skills a lot easier. I also like to interface a little bit of magic, a little bit of history, a little bit of religion, whenever I can, to help players with varieties of skills contribute to getting to that endpoint, right? You want to try and hit as many little points on that skill list as you can to give a lot of people the ability to contribute in a unique way to reaching that end goal. So especially if we're doing low tier stuff, knowing the skill list inside and out is going to benefit you a lot as far as creating, spurring some ideas, taking some inspiration from the existing skill list, and giving your players something to do with all that information.
I do. Do you like to know what skills your players have beforehand, and tailor that to them, or what?
Good DMing, yes. If I'm DMing for a campaign I'm particularly passionate about, absolutely. Especially if it's hard whenever you're doing your first session, especially if you don't necessarily know what characters you're dealing with. A lot of DMs are going to sit down at the table, make the characters, and then immediately play with it, and you don't necessarily either have the brainwidth or bandwidth, or it's a lot to keep track of. Oh, these are all of the skills. You don't need to list all those out. I would generally expect most skills to be represented in some way, shape, or form, and don't make any of them mandatory, but make them all available as means of exploring is a better way to think about it, right?
Sure.
If you can have, if I don't know what my player skills are, and you don't necessarily need to, I can still make it so there are ways Arcana checks help you move forward. There are ways nature checks help you move forward. There are ways these different perception and insight and the social skills are a big one. Make sure those help you get a way forward. That's a good way to sort of frame your creation of adventures. None of them are mandatory, but they all will help the players get guided towards that end result at the end of it.
All right, sounds good.
Another quick, easy thing to do, DCs. Easy DCs are 10, middling, challenging DCs are 15, very difficult DCs are 20. That's the easiest numbers to start with. I do almost all of my DCs in those kinds of groupings, is 10, 15, 20. I very rarely deviate from those numbers unless I'm deliberately trying to be cryptic to be like, oh, this is 13, because it's not that easy, but it's not that hard. All right, sure, we'll go with 13. But for the most part, if you're new to DMing, sticking to 10, 15, and 20 is pretty easy. Another easy, quick thing to do for intro DMing when doing skills and stuff.
Sure. Well, anything else you want to talk about for this session?
I mean, this is like intro to DMing. This is the bare minimum you need. I genuinely think the most I would take away from this is why you're doing it, which is you're there to make sure everyone has a good time. So like, rule of cool is very important to a lot of tables for that means, but also like, knowing the players that you're working with. Some of them don't want to do rule of cool that much. They want to play the rules written tactical RPG that is still done in the 5th tradition. I would advocate maybe picking a Pathfinder because that's a lot more tactical. And there are a lot of systems that are better for that kind of gameplay, but that's not the point. So yeah, know what your players are about, know how you can kind of get everyone to have fun, have that be your end objective. And then knowing where you're starting, knowing where you're ending, and having an idea of the skills and the DCs is basically all you need to play Dungeons & Dragons right now.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm sure we'll continue this. Like you said, we got a lot of other things we can get into more specifically, make our own videos about that.
Yeah, commenters down below, if you have any specific, like, how do I, obviously there's a ton open. How do you prep encounters? How do you prep social encounters? How do you prep combat? How do you, do like well thought out NPCs, motivations, villains, long-term campaign scope? There's tons of different things to talk about in this scope. So, let us know if you have any or specific topics you want to hear about. I can talk about all of them at nauseam.
So. Yeah, that would be great. Actually, let us keep me from having to think of new crap. So yeah, let us know what you'd like to hear down in the comments, or any thoughts you had on what was said here in this episode. So I guess that's it for now. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it, a gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description, where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.